All right, well, if I could get everybody's attention up in this direction, we're going to get started this evening. And let me go ahead and invite all of you guys who are facing away from me to make yourself comfortable and spin your chair around, pull out an ottoman, take out a pillow, whatever it is that it takes for you to get comfortable. Well, so great to have all of you. Thank you guys for coming out in spite of the rain that we had earlier. And I hope, and I think we can say this every night, that it'll be worth your trip just for the meal, if nothing else, every week. So good food here for sure. Yeah. Guys in the kitchen do a great job, and there's more where that came from. Well, I know there's a variety of ways in which people get to the Alpha Course. We've been doing this for a number of years now. And people come because they knew somebody at work or a family member that invited them, or we'll always meet people who just got an invitation hung on their door, and they are here. I will say this, you are incredibly brave. You had no idea what you're getting yourself into, and yet you are here this evening. So with great respect, we say thank you for coming out tonight. What we do tonight is just introduce the course. So we kind of give you a little bit of an idea what the course will feel like and what it's going to cover. And then tonight we just ask you to fill out a form at the end if you want to come back for the rest of it, or as much as you think you can come back for, you'll have a chance to do that at the end. But we also recognize that in asking you to come back to this thing called the Alpha Course, which the Alpha Course, if you haven't heard anything about it, it's a 10-week question and answer formatted study of what exactly is Christianity, what exactly is it all about. So we realize asking folks to sign up for something that could take 10 weeks to go through, it's a little risky, and there's a little bit of fear involved, quite honestly. So we've kind of surveyed some folks. We have a little bit of a top 10 concerns people might have about signing up for the Alpha Course, and you might have some of these concerns as well. Let's have a look. Top 10 questions or concerns about signing up for Alpha. Number 10, 10 weeks. Really? I don't know. Number 9, 10 weeks. For real? You guys are serious. Number 8, afraid of being asked to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. That's just a fear for some people, what we discovered. Afraid of being asked to hold hands and spell Kumbaya, which I'm pretty sure you couldn't have spelled it until tonight, right? Number 6, here we go, number 6. Afraid you might miss a rare story about Donald Trump. You're here tonight, you're not watching the news. You might not hear about him for how long? A half hour? I don't know. Number 5, 10 weeks for real. You do this for 10 weeks. Number 4, concerned Kool-Aid may be a beverage choice. See, now only the old people laugh on that one. All the young people are going, why is that a problem? Jonestown, Guyana, anything like that? No. Number 3, fear of handling snakes. You know, it's a religious meeting, have no idea what could be going on here later. Number 2, concern that Alpha is the sister company of Amway. And later on, you'll be asked to multi-level marketing with us. Number 1 concern about signing up for the Alpha Course, 10 weeks for real? No, actually, after tonight, it'll just be 9 weeks and you'll be in great shape. Well, let me just tell you, my name's Keith Collins. I'm the senior pastor here at Lakeview, and I'll introduce myself to you a little bit more in a moment. But the course, let me introduce it to you first. The course was developed by a man named Nicky Gumbel, who is a British chap out of London. Interesting background. Nicky was trained as a lawyer, and then he went on to be a pastor. And some people would say you can't trust either one of those, but he went to some pretty impressive places in school, Cambridge, Oxford, and he put together a study that he called The Questions of Life, and it was intended to just introduce people to the Christian faith. And next thing you know, they began to conduct this course in London, packaged it together a little bit, and have sent it literally all over the world. It has been in multiple cultures, multiple languages. 20 million plus people, I believe at this point, have attended a course like this. And we've been doing it a number of years, and we've seen quite a number of people come through this as well. What we did, we put together a little video just to explain to you what the course is about and what people have experienced who have gone through the course. Now, the only challenge with the video is I think I'm wearing bell bottoms in this and have a whole lot less gray hair. So it's been many years since this video was done, but most of it's relevant except for that we've done a lot more of these alphas than this thing admits, and there's been a lot more people that have gone through alpha now after so many years. So take a look real quick at the video, and I think it'll just stir up some thoughts about what the course is about, and I'll come back and give us some more details in just a moment. Hi, I'm Keith Collins. I'm the senior pastor of Lakeview Christian Center. And I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to the Alpha Course. It's an amazing course. Over 8 million people have attended it worldwide from all kinds of different cultures and religions and backgrounds. Here at Lakeview, we've been doing the Alpha Course for about 5 years now, and we've seen over 1,500 people that have attended just ours. You know, one of the things that we've discovered is that the Bible actually provides real answers to some of the most difficult questions that we as people are facing.
The question that I needed answered most, that had been with me for decades, was why am I here?
You believe what you believe, I believe what I believe, but who determines who's right or wrong? And I just knew that somebody was wrong. They all couldn't be right. Somebody had to be wrong, so I just assumed they were all wrong.
I was just looking for something, you know? I tried what the world offered me. I went through the program. I tried to be sober there. I tried to find my own sense of spirituality. And it wasn't working for me.
Was there a God? Is the Bible real? Who is Jesus? Why should I read the Bible? Why should I go to church? I had many questions.
You know, in our 90-mile-an-hour pace life, sometimes one of the most valuable things we can do is just pause and stop and ask good questions like, what do I believe? And why do I believe it? And what really is the meaning of life? The Alpha Course is a place where you can ask those kind of questions in a non-threatening environment and listen to other people think through those things as well. But it's not just about asking questions. It's also about relationships and friendships that get formed. People who come together and share life and have a time to share about their own experiences together in a non-threatening, non-pressured environment.
I decided to come to the Alpha Course mainly out of curiosity. I said, let me go see what this is about. If I don't like it, I'm out of there. I'm sitting close to the door. One thing that I experienced when I first walked through the doors was the friendliness and the acceptance of those around me, like they had known me my whole life.
The world is pretty rude, so you know, you show up at Alpha expecting maybe people to be that way, but it's just they're not.
It was friendly. It was fun. You know, it wasn't just dinner at a church environment. It wasn't somber or sober or stiff. There's a lot of people there too. You know, so I didn't feel so centered on. I didn't feel alone.
When I first came to Alpha, I was really afraid. I didn't know what was going to happen. Everyone there was very, very, very nice, and they welcomed us. We felt very welcomed immediately. So the fear vanished, although I was wondering what we're going to do for those 10 weeks.
On a typical evening in Alpha, we'll come together, we'll have a great meal, then we'll have a brief teaching, and then afterwards there'll be a time of discussion where people can just share their own thoughts about the topic that was presented that night, and you can listen and interact with others as they think through some of the questions of life that are being discussed.
Alpha is that's a place where you can think. It's a place where you can challenge your thoughts. You can challenge other people's thoughts. And it was accepted and encouraged.
It really got your thought process going, got you thinking about why you do the things that you do in your life. And what are you basing that information on, and why do you believe what you believe?
You know, we were learning, but at the same time, it was fun. You know, we laughed a lot, we joked a lot, and we were serious a lot.
You go, you listen, and you talk about it. It's a place that's warm and welcoming, and you could have your questions answered and not be afraid of the answer. It's not threatening. You could leave if you want to. But if you stay, you can learn so much.
This was a place that I could think. This is a place where I could discuss and have intellectual conversations. I didn't have to leave my brain at the door.
Whether you're asking questions about life or about Christianity, or maybe just curious about what the Bible really says, why not invest 10 weeks in a course that's designed to probe those very issues?
Everyone needs compassion, a love that's never failing. let mercy fall on me. Where everyone needs.
Come check it out. If you don't like it, you don't have to come back. But if your experience is like so many others, we believe you will enjoy it, and you'll form friendships that will last a lifetime.
It has totally changed my life, my relationship with my husband, my children, most of all the Lord. I definitely think that no matter what the issue is, the Alpha Course has the answer to.
I think you should come to Alpha because it'll change your life. It changed ours, and we've invited some friends to come because we thought it might help them too.
This was a true learning experience for me.
I want to invite you to come and join us.
Well, if I could, that was about 10 years ago, I think, when we did that video. So if 10 years ago we were moving at 90 miles an hour, light speed today, I'm not sure how fast it feels like life is moving. And I just think it's a good thing for us to face something that we bring up in this video. It's asking good questions. You know, most of us, we just sort of inherit life. We were born in a certain location, related to certain people, just kind of started down a road, went to school, took a job, and just didn't stop and ask really good questions. Just started living life before we figured out what exactly do we think life is supposed to be about. Right, here's just some interesting thought in this category. Let me get this thing to work here. Am I working? There we go. Os Guinness fellow writes a very interesting book called The Long Journey Home. He says, most of us feel immortal in our teens and 20s, then move through life so fast in our 30s and 40s that we lose sight of the journey and think only of our careers. Even in our 50s, we barely hear the roar of the rapids several brins downriver. Have you awakened to the journey of life? Or are you among those drifting down the years? Are you among those so caught up in the project of themselves that they choose not to hear the flow of time? Are you living an examined life? Or are you living in the hand-me-down ideas of others? Are you open to the full interrogation of life? Or are you closed to the search because you believe what you've always believed without question? Now listen, most of us would admit having some good answers to something as big and as important as the life that we're going to live and why we want to live it that way is pretty important. But it also can be a little bit threatening too. I mean, to kind of get interrogated by life and to figure out, hey, why do you believe this? Why have you always believed this? How do you know you're right? Why don't you believe something different than what you believe? Those are important questions. And yet sometimes we just don't take the time to slow up and answer those questions. It's interesting, Socrates, he said the unexamined life is not worth living. Now listen, whether you slow up and actually write your questions down and think about them or not, that doesn't mean you're not asking questions. People are asking questions as they go through life. Like here's some recognizable faces. An actor named Shia LaBeouf, pretty successful guy in the movie industry. He says, sometimes I feel like I'm living a meaningless life and I get frightened. I know I'm one of the luckiest dudes in America right now. I have a great house. My parents don't have to work. I've got money. I'm famous. But it could all change, man. It could go away. You never know. I don't handle fame well. Most actors on most days don't. They don't think that they're worthy. I have no idea where this insecurity comes from, but it's a God-sized hole. If I knew, I'd fill it and I'd be on my way. Well, how about Mr. Tom Brady? When he's not deflating footballs, he's doing interviews with 60 Minutes. Tom says, why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? I mean, maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, this is what is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. Me, I think, God, it's got to be more than this. I mean, this can't be all it's cracked up to be. And then the interviewer, Steve Croft, was doing the interview for 60 Minutes, said, well, what's the answer? And Brady's response was, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I love playing football. I love being quarterback for this team. I love deflating footballs. No, did he say that? But at the same time, I think there are a lot of other parts about me that I'm trying to find. Right? And here's a guy who, most of us who ever wanted to be an athlete, we would have loved to have his story. We would have loved to be standing in his shoes, arriving at his accomplishments, and yet somebody who would have lived the life that we would have longed to live still sounds like I'm still looking for something. Whatever I've experienced hasn't kind of fixed me. Big successful guys in the business world like Ted Turner, starter of Cable News Network, and during an interview with Barbara Walters, was once asked, what do you mean by success? What to you is successful? He replied, I think it's kind of an empty bag, to tell the truth. You have to get there to really know that. Money doesn't buy happiness, and neither does honors or position and awards or trophies. Here's a recognizable face. Jim Carrey's done a lot of successful acting. He says, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. Years ago, back in the early 1900s, there was before all of our digital age and multimedia, people wrote cartoons and they went all over the world, just, political cartoons and satirical cartoons and character cartoons. Well, one of the world-renowned greatest cartoonists was a fellow named Ralph Barton. And he, in spite of the success that he had, because he was world acclaimed and was recognized all over the world, but yet he had this experience in his life that was deeply empty as well. And this is what he wrote on his suicide note. He says, I've had few difficulties, many friends, great successes. I've gone from wife to wife and from house to house, visited great countries of the world, but I'm fed up with inventing devices to fill up 24 hours a day. So, here's a person who got to experience life at a level that some of us are kind of convinced that, well, if I could just have what that guy has, well, that would kind of fix me. It would make my life feel like I know that it would just be better. But yet people have experienced things that we long to experience only to get there and turn around and tell us, it didn't fix me. I'm still in need. And here, in spite of Ralph Barton's success, he couldn't find the will to live any longer and committed suicide. Interesting, this is a caricature of Ernest Hemingway. And here's an interesting story. Most of us recognize Ernest Hemingway, but here's some accomplishment from Hemingway's life. He was a silver medal of military valor was given to him in World War I. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1953, the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954. In 2001, 2 of his books would be named to the list of the 100 best English language novels of the 20th century. And what's interesting is Ernest Hemingway committed suicide in 1961. So life is full of questions, life is full of searching, and sometimes we don't find answers to the questions that seem to be haunting us the most, right? So here's what we want to do in the Alpha Course. Let's pull some questions into our lives, and we do that. We pull them into our tables here, and we talk about them. Talk about the things that we're thinking about, right? What is the meaning of life? How do we deal with guilt, right? Now, we're not going to get too psycho counseling on you in here, but let's be honest here. Most of us have got some stories to tell. We look in the rearview mirror, and there's relationships that used to be here that aren't anymore. There's family connections that used to be one way that they're not here in our lives anymore. And there's a great deal of regret, things that we wish we had done differently, things that if we're honest with ourselves, it's not just that person screwed things up, but I screwed things up. How do you deal with the guilt of that? How do we make sense of human suffering? Right? When we're about to approach the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, right? We remember some of the suffering that took place locally. Globally, you can't watch the news without looking at human suffering. What's the cause of evil in the world? How do I pray? What does the Bible have to say? What is God like? Right? These are questions that we have about life. And what we want to do in the Alpha Course is take some time to search those questions. Come up with some answers. Get rid of some ideas. Grab some ideas that really make sense. And take the time to do that over the next several weeks. All right, let me introduce you tonight. I'm going to introduce you to myself. That doesn't take very long because there's not much to tell. I'm going to introduce you to the little manual we're going to use, although you don't have the cool red version. You've got like a cheap copy of it. But if you come back next week, you get the cool red version. Okay, so that's a reason enough right there. Let's see, I've been a pastor here at Lakeview for about 22 years now. That was not what I grew up thinking I was going to be doing. I kind of thought I was going to be more in the Tom Brady mold here, but injury along the way ended it all. But I'm from here in the New Orleans area. I haven't gone far. Grew up in River Ridge, so I'm from the other side of town. Any River Ridgers? Anybody grew up in Rivers? Nice. Excellent. Great to have you. You're honored amongst all the rest of the low life here. But no incredible story in life. I'm just a typical suburban guy. Grew up, family was a decent, middle-class family. We went to church. Eventually, I went to LSU and then graduated from the University of New Orleans. My educational background is engineering. I worked in the engineering placement field, doing business in that world in the CBD for about 6 years. Came on here. Before that time, I married my only love in life. My wife and I have been married for coming up on 23 years. We have 7 children. Yes, we do own a TV. Kind of had some questions on that. But the topic of religion would not have always been a topic that I was extremely comfortable with. It's funny, people today talk about anything in public, but I can remember my mom kind of just giving you that cold stare if you brought up stuff in public that you weren't supposed to be talking about, kind of grab you by the ear. It's like you get pulled on the side, and you do not talk in public about, it was like religion, sex, and politics. And now I'm thinking, hello, have you seen talk television today? I mean, that's all that is talked about. But there was a day when you just didn't talk about that stuff in public. Right, so where on earth were you ever going to have a conversation about religion? Well, here's great news about the Alpha Course. Just kind of sets you at ease. That subject's not going to sneak up on you here. We're not going to be talking about cheesecake recipes and suddenly inject some conversation about religion. You got people at work that are kind of like that. It's like you're talking about anything and everything under the sun, just the weather. It's like, man, what is this, like the hottest July on record or what? And that guy just kind of suddenly spins on you and says, hot, brother, you want to talk about hot? Let's talk about hell. And that's where you're going if you don't change. And it's like, whoa, man, I was just talking weather here. All right, well, it's not going to sneak up on you that way because I'm coming tonight. We're going to talk about religion. We're going to talk about what I believe. People are going to say what they believe. We're not always going to agree. I'm going to think that guy over there is really funny, but he's really weird, but he's kind of cool to listen to. I mean, you're going to have all kinds of responses going on. And just be comfortable with that. People are going to have permission to talk about what they believe, and you do too. Now, we're set up at tables, and so what we want to do is each night there'll be a table host. Each night he'll help you generate some discussion about the topic that's being shared each evening and some questions for that. You don't have to share something. It's like you got to come like, oh man, I'm going to be quizzed. I need to have good answers. If you're just uncomfortable and you don't want to share something, you just sit quietly at the table. But I'll promise you this, if you'll venture out and think out some things, ask some of your own questions, share a few thoughts, you're going to get so much more out of this than just being quiet. But I understand not everybody enjoys kind of being put on the spot about questions, and you don't have to answer everything, but participate in the ways that you're comfortable. But here's an example, right? So if you look at your little cheap imitation of my cool manual, session number 1 raises this question. And each night there's going to be a question that gets asked. And so our first question for this session is there more to life than this? And then you open up there on that first page, and it asks this question: what, if any, has been your experience of Christianity? Right, if you've had any experience in the realm of the religion of Christianity, what's been your experience? Right? Has it been boring? Has it been untrue? Have you found it irrelevant? Well, you know what? It's interesting, this topic, this question for tonight, is there more to life than this? I can remember being a teenager and laying in my bed at night and asking that question. Now, I wasn't asking that question because I didn't have any belief in God. I wasn't asking it because I'd never heard any of the stories from the Bible or I'd never been to church. I mean, we went to church every week growing up. But I had questions, and life still felt empty. So I'm a living example of somebody who can be involved in religion and still feel like I'm missing something along the way in my life. So I was asking this question. And interesting, this response, people's experience of Christianity. For some people, it's boring, right? Christianity is just a boring experience, right? And it was that for me. I'm going to church every week, but I'm not there, but I'm there. I'm thinking about other things. I'm not engaged. And as soon as I leave, whatever this is primarily about isn't going with me into the week. That's not going to be part of my experience. It just seemed like it was boring. And boring's not really attractive. Nobody wants to do boring, right? We're attracted to stuff that looks like this. Right? I mean, here's this guy. He shows up early. He's set up. I've never seen this in a church parking lot. Right? This guy's early. He's got a big G for God on the side of his van. And, he's out there grilling, got brats going, and people are getting ready to walk into the church. He's high-fiving them. Woo! Big day for God today, man. Woo! Yeah. This was never the church parking lot experience. And anybody that I knew that was involved in this religion, it just seemed like what they were talking about or what they weren't talking about primarily just gave me the impression this is really boring. But then at some point, somebody put a Bible in my path. And I picked it up and I started reading it. And I began to look at the characters, their lives that were being lived out in the Bible. They were people, just average Joes, who had this encounter with Jesus Christ. Who he was, the way he was, the things that he said about life, the power that he had in his life, things that he could do. It caught their attention. And all of a sudden, these people began to live some of the most adventurous lives you'd ever seen anywhere. People that would take risks. They would leave everything in order to follow Christ. Now, even if you looked at that and you thought, well, those people are crazy. Well, when you looked at them, they believed something that mattered to them. And they started down this road of an incredible adventure that grabbed their hearts and meant something to them personally. Well, I saw that in the Bible, but I hadn't seen it in any of the religion that I had been around. But then I got to know some people who were living life kind of like what you saw in the Bible. People were living life. And they were living this adventure. They were taking risks and had hearts full of convictions and really wanted things that mattered to them in this world. And then I began to experience God in my own life as a teenager. And my life began to take on those qualities. So personally, where I used to be was Christianity is boring. But my experience has been it's anything but boring. It's quite an adventure. What about the thought that Christianity is untrue? Right? Is Christianity untrue? It's just a bunch of hokey lies, folklore, kids' stories that people made up that just kind of caught on. Now listen, if you look at the culture-shaping impact of Christianity all over the world, the ideas that make up Christianity have infected the world. And they've done it in quite a powerful way. The ways in which governments have been formed, the laws that inform the lands of people all over the world scream out that this is not just somebody made up a story and passed it to another story. It's not like a big telephone game, where just somebody passed along some bad ideas to others. So most people don't really believe that Christianity is untrue. But I will say this, my experience with people through the years is I think there's an element to Christianity that it is hard to believe. That doesn't make it untrue, but it is perhaps hard to believe for some. And maybe today, even more so than for some other days in the past. And I say that because as never before, we have become a culture that thinks one way when it comes to scientific ideas. And then we examine everything else in life through a different lens. Now, we think everything should fit in the realm of science. So everything needs to be proven by science, validated by science, looked at under a microscope, developed through a test tube, and there's got to be a math equation. And if you can't write out enough letters and numbers, feed it into a computer and have God pop out the other side, well, then God must not exist. Well, what if there's aspects to life that don't fit into scientific testing? Right? Which we're going to study some of this out as we move through the course. There are historical things about our lives that don't fit under scientific tests. There's not a person here who scientifically can tell me that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Right? You do realize he did do that, right? Right? Most of us are cool with that. But you're not cool with that. You don't believe that because scientifically, somebody in a white suit with some test tubes made Christopher Columbus go poof, appear in the lab, and tell that story to them with evidence and a slideshow of where he was when he was here. Right? We believe it for different reasons. There's things inside of us that you and I experience in our lives that are very, very real to us, but you can't measure them scientifically. Tell me how real love is to you. Pretty real, isn't it? Pretty important. But can you get a needle out and come draw some love out of me so you can figure out how much of that is in me? Can you run a test on me to figure out how loving I am or how much love I need? But every one of us would say, you know, we do want to love people and we want to be loved by others. There's aspects to our lives that are more than scientifically studied. Right? So Christianity is one of those things. A belief in God is one of those things that science is not the only thing to bring into this discussion. And it's fine to bring science into the discussion as long as one recognizes that science is limited. It can study some things and it can't help you in others. But in a scientific culture, it for some means, well, Christianity is hard for me to believe. Let me tell you the real reason why I think for many people Christianity is hard to believe. If Christianity is true, it paints this picture. There is a God out there. That God is a personal being that has an opinion about life. And since he's God, he's much more than just, you know, somebody working at Walmart with an opinion. He's like God over everything. Somehow he sort of owns everything. Everything, when God puts all the toys away, they go back in his closet, right? So if that God really does exist, I wonder if he has an opinion about life. I wonder if he has an opinion about how I'm living my life and what the purpose of my life is and whether or not anything I'm doing in my life shouldn't be done that way, but it should be done this way. Now, if that exists, that makes me a little hesitant to want to believe this. Because if that's true and I believe it, then all of a sudden there's more to my life than just my opinion, my preferences, doing things my way. And quite honestly, I think for most people, because most people are going to say that they believe that there's a God out there. But when it comes to believing what he has said, it might cost you something to believe it. And most of us are going to be a little bit hesitant in that category. So I don't think most of us would say Christianity is untrue. But I do think that we would maybe say, well, it is a little hard to believe. And I get that. What about this last thought? Is Christianity irrelevant? You know, I mean, there's a lot of modern problems in people's lives. There's a lot that we're concerned about today. Does Christianity really address these things? Isn't it just some archaic way of life of people who wore togas and walked around in the sand with sandals? And what do they know about life today? Does that make Christianity even relevant for us at all? Well, are there conditions in the human experience that are the same whether you wear a toga, whether you wear a suit, whether you drive a car or a chariot? Are there some things inside the human soul, the human heart, that are the same across all the span of years that would make what Christianity had to say in ancient times as true as what it has to say today for those of us who live in a different time frame and setting? I think one of the things that most of us would realize is for anything to be relevant in our life, it has to touch our life in a way that we need it to touch our lives, right? One of the most popular books that was ever written in the last century, I think it was written in 1946, is that right then? Yeah, 1946. Popular book was written. It caught fire and took off. It was a book written by a pediatrician named Dr. Spock. Not the one from Star Trek, but a different guy. He wrote this book about children's behavior and raising children. Now, the timing of it, if you notice, 1946 is perfect because he's right as the baby boom is taking off. So you're about to have the largest generation of people ever in this country giving birth to children. And all of a sudden, all these children are going to come home. And I don't know how you were when your children came home, right? We brought home 7 children. Eventually, we lightened up. But, like the first one, we were just this paranoid. I was. My wife was probably better than I was. But, is the baby breathing? Oh, my gosh, she's not breathing, staring over all night long. And wishing, the first night when they told us we could go home from the hospital, it was like, no, that's okay. We're good, maybe for the next week or 2. I'm not sure I feel safe with her just living with me. And so you wish you had somebody that could give you some instructions. Well, along comes Dr. Spock. And you bring home children, eventually those children grow up and they go through terrible twos, they turn into teenagers, and it's like you read every book you can find at that point. It's like, man, somebody help me with this thing. Well, you become interested in that book because a need just came into your life. Right? If you're a single person or you're done raising kids and you just want to enjoy the grandparent years, you don't want to correct anybody anymore. Thank you, grandparents. You just want to feed them candy and then send them home. I couldn't give you a parenting manual. But when you have children, it's like, yep, I'll take 2 of those. My husband needs to read this as well because you need it. All right, now, so if there's a God out there who created us, is he relevant to the lives that we're living? Well, my question for you tonight is, does your life feel like you need God? Because my life didn't always feel like it needed God. And when it didn't feel like it needed God, I wasn't interested in God. But I did get to a place where my life began to feel like I need something. And then eventually I came to realize it was God that I needed. So Christianity, I believe, is relevant when we recognize that we have a need in our life. All right. Quickly, let me walk you through a couple of thoughts here that are in tonight's questions here on page 8. There's a little list here of 3 things, 1, 2, 3 there. And they sit under this thought. Jesus claims something, right? He claims to provide something into our life. Now, again, we're going to explore who Jesus is. He's the central figure of Christianity. And we're going to explore who he is. You don't have to agree with what's being said, but it's food for thought. And we're going to discuss that. Tonight you won't be discussing tonight, but next week you'll be discussing the things that are shared here. And you may not agree with some of these things, but Jesus made some claims. And so to explore Christianity, we at least have to look at what he claimed. Right? Well, Jesus claimed a couple things. He claimed he could provide direction for a lost world, that he could provide reality in a confused world, and he could provide life in a dark world. So let's just explore those 3 little things here tonight out of a phrase that Jesus brings here. But here's the questions that we're asking about life, that Christianity jumps into these questions, right? Questions like this. Is there more to life than this? What am I doing on earth, right? These are purpose questions. What's the point of life? What's the purpose of my life? Where am I heading? And so these are questions inside of man. So man is looking for something. Jesus jumps in and he makes a statement. This is what he says about himself. He says, I am the way and the truth and the life. Right? That's the claim that Jesus makes. Something about himself personally. So one of the things that he recognizes about us is there's something inside of us that's searching, and Jesus responds to that search that's going off on the inside of us by saying, I am the way. I'm the direction that your life is seeking. Now, let's just tweak out a couple thoughts here from Jesus. Jesus understood something about what's going on the inside of every human being. And he used language that kind of gave that away. Right? He understood the inner condition of humanity. Right? John chapter 6, verse 35. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. Now, Jesus spoke a lot in parables or used stories a lot. He used things that were familiar to people to explain things that they maybe weren't understanding. Let me tell you what Jesus wasn't saying. He didn't look like a bunny bread loaf hopping around with arms, right? He's not standing up there saying, I'm bread. I'm the bread of life. But he is identifying that there's something on the inside of you that you identify with. It's called hunger and thirst. Right, now look at, what are those concepts? At some point in your day, probably you experience this today, you're running along doing life, and something on the inside of you, without notice, without you setting an alarm clock, without you reminding yourself, begins to just kind of let you know, psst, I'm getting a little hungry. Right, and you ignore it, you're busy. Half an hour later, psst, I'm getting a little hungry. Right, another hour, you're very busy, you don't have time for this. Psst, I said, right? Things are starting to get ugly on the inside. There's this intensity growing inside of you that exists within the human experience. Jesus said there's something in your life that's like the physical hunger you experience. It's like the thirst you experience. You are a being that has something inside of you that's trying to reach outside of you to find something to fill up what's lacking inside of you. Just like you're hungry and you go outside of yourself to get food to give you a sense of satisfaction, that's what your soul is like. So Jesus identified something about the inside of man, but then he makes this giant statement about himself. He says, I am the bread of life. Right? He doesn't say that having a fulfilling job is the bread of life. He doesn't say having a family and raising children is the bread of life. He doesn't say having a healthy body is the bread of life. He says, I am the bread of life. I'm the thing that your soul has these hunger pangs going off on the inside of you that are going, psst, I'm hungry for something. I'm hungry for something. I'm thirsty for something. Right? Jesus used another illustration about himself. He says, I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. So Jesus describing the purpose that he came into this world was to give something to man that was missing, right? You don't come and give to people what they already have. They don't need that. But there was something about life that Jesus identified. That thing that generates that inner hunger, it's an emptiness in the inside of man. Man is searching for something to fill up the emptiness that's inside of him, the missing life part, right? Here's an interesting video I want you guys to see. It's a little dated, but I love this guy, John Stossel. He does some interesting interviews through the years. Very thought-provoking. This little video is about the pursuit of happiness, and see if you can identify what some of these folks experience.
Everyone wants to feel good.
Such a good feeling is where I want to be. Yeah.
And while many of these things do make people feel good, if not great, they don't last, say the researchers. Disappointment awaits those of us who pursue happiness through hedonism, drugs, sex, shopping, food even. They don't provide lasting happiness. Fame doesn't work either.
I grew up convinced that true happiness was being a sports hero.
What could be better than the joy of success? The applause. Yet the Super Bowl winning quarterback asks, is that all there is? Probably the biggest myth is that money's the answer. 25 years ago, when college students were asked, what's important? Most said family, or developing a meaningful life philosophy. But today, most students say being very well off financially.
You've just won $10 million.
Well, if that's true, then people who win a lot of money should be happy. But are they? Meet some lottery winners. Teresa Brunning of Colorado won $1 million. Janetta Williams won $5 million in the Arizona lottery. Curtis Sharp collected $5 million in New York.
For a time, it seemed like I was in a dream world, you know?
Did you come down to earth?
Oh, yes. I came down, you know. I came down to earth. I got divorced from my first wife and married my second wife, and I spent a lot of money on the wedding, you know. It's
$100,000 on a
yes,
grand wedding.
That didn't last 5 years, you know what I'm saying?
Maybe he didn't win enough. Sherry Gagliardi and her husband won $26 million.
I was numb for 3 years.
But you must have been happy.
Yes and no. I got a divorce 2 years after we had won.
Studies of lottery winners have found that within a year, most say they are no happier than they were before they won.
Money didn't buy you happiness?
No, of course not. You could buy a therapist, marriage counselor. People have a misconception about having money. You go out and you go, oh, that's what I want, I'll buy it. A couple of weeks later, it's like, that emptiness comes back. Then what?
I mean, how many suits can I wear? How many hats can I wear? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, come on. I noticed that none of these winners is offering to give the money back. It's nice to be able to buy things.
Good afternoon. Would you like to try Eternity for Ladies?
Life, liberty, and the purchase of happiness has become the new American dream.
Psychologist David Myers, who spent 6 years examining hundreds of studies on happiness for this book, says once you get past poverty, money doesn't help, no matter how much stuff you buy.
The stockpiles of CDs, the closets full of clothes, the big screen stereo TV systems. Doesn't do it. Clearly it doesn't do it. People having achieved that level of wealth have now adapted to it, and it takes new increments, a faster computer, a bigger TV screen or whatever, to rejuice the joy that the initial purchase gained for them.
To rejuice the joy. You see it in babies. Give a 3-month-old a mobile with 2 objects and most like it. But researcher Jeffrey Fagan of St. John's University says if kids are given a 10-object mobile and then you try to get them to go back to the 2-object one, they lose interest or cry.
We get used to having more, and it doesn't work anymore.
That's right. And that's why today, with double the incomes and double what money buys for us, we're no happier than we were 40 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot to identify with as I watch that. Every time I see it, there's just this compelling urgency on the inside of us that keeps making us search and look and search and look. There's a reason why we search. There's a reason why we keep looking, because there's something that continues to be missing on the inside. And that's not a new modern phenomena, right? This has been true of man for forever and ever here. Ray Pritchard wrote a book called The Anchor of the Soul. He says, we were made to know God. We are incurably religious by nature. That's why every human society, no matter how primitive, has some concept of a higher power, some vision of reality that goes beyond the natural. Right? You study humanity through the ages and across the globe, and you will find the people who are reaching out for a God in their life. There's something on the inside that cries out that there's something to be reached for that I don't have in and of myself, and there's nothing that can satisfy me in this realm. It must be something in the form of God. Great St. Augustine spoke this in about the 5th century. He said, speaking of prayer to God, he said, you made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. So then Jesus comes along recognizing this inner condition that's in man. He says, I am the way. Right? I'm the way to satisfaction in life. I'm the way to get that hunger inside of you to be satisfied and fulfilled. And that's a big claim, and we're going to investigate whether or not Jesus has got the credentials to back up some of that. He also says this, I am the way and I am the truth. Right? Interesting. Number 2 there, Jesus claims to provide reality in a confused world. And I think today's world is as confused as it's ever been. It just has a bigger ability to publish all that confusion. So you can go on and read one confused blog post after another. You can watch one broadcast on TV or listen to it on radio after another that's hawking all kinds of ideas. And you know one thing that I think all this information age has bred in us? We've got so many ideas out there. We've also had to just feel like, let's just let all these ideas exist all at the same time. Let's not mess with all of them. We'll just pick the ones we like and ignore the ones we don't like. Okay, you can do that if you want. But what you can't do in life is you can't just live amongst ideas that are important and treat them all like they're equally important. You can't live amongst ideas that are in conflict with each other and agree with both of them. Right? There's some basic rules to thinking. And, thinking is becoming a lost art, but we have to think. We have to think about what we believe if we're going to answer some of the hard questions. So, question for us. Does it matter what we believe? Does it even matter? There's so many beliefs out there today. So many people believe so many different things. Does it even matter what you believe? All right, well, let's just think it out a little bit. This is what the Course tries to help us do. Isn't it enough if people are sincere? Right? Today, it seems like when you hear a discussion about whether a belief is right or wrong are taken off the table, and the only thing that seems to be left on the table is, does this person sincerely believe that? So right and wrong, that doesn't seem to matter. Are you sincere? All right, well, just think for a moment with me. Can you be sincere and at the same time be wrong? Even though you're very, very sincere, right? Husbands, how many of you guys have brought home the wrong birthday or anniversary present for your wife? You were very sincere, but you were very wrong. And she made sure you knew that. In the realm of religion, there's people who believe a lot of things that are quite sincere. But their sincerity doesn't force what they believe to become true or right. Right? Illustration. A number of years ago, true story, some of you guys may remember it in the news. There was a little group of folks in California, a little bit of a cult that was gathered together. A man named Marshall Applegate was the leader of this cult. They had a belief that the Hale-Bopp comet, which actually was on its way passing through our part of the solar system, when it passed by, in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet was a spaceship that aliens were on board. And if they were to commit suicide, they would be transported onto that spaceship and whisked away to a better place. Many of them sincerely believed that, sincere enough that they actually committed suicide in order to be transported onto that spacecraft. Now, how many guys, you don't have to show your hands on this, but I don't know if you believe, was there really a spaceship on the tail end of that comet? And if there wasn't, did there suddenly one appeared as soon as the sincerity kicked in? Right? We sincerely believe this. Well, if you sincerely believe it, then poof, there's a little ship. Their sincerity had no impact, did it, on whether or not that spaceship really existed. They ended up being sincerely wrong about something, even though they were sincere. And so we can't elevate sincerity above if something is right or wrong. Here's an interesting note from one of the the suicide terrorist, Muhammad Atta. This was a note that he wrote the night before and left it for the other guys that were involved in the airplanes being flown into the World Trade Center. He says, you should pray, you should fast, you should ask God for guidance, you should ask God for help. Continue to pray throughout this night, continue to recite the Quran. You will be entering paradise. You'll be entering the happiest life, everlasting life. He had a belief system that said if you take the life of innocent people for this cause, you will enter paradise and the happiest of lives. I don't know this man, but he sounds sincere. But his sincerity doesn't make his actions right. It doesn't make his belief system right. And so we have to, if we're going to examine anything to put our faith in and to believe, then we have to be able to say sincerity is not the most important thing. Right? Because I can be sincere in my beliefs and be sincerely wrong. Well, how about dealing with conflicting ideas? Does it matter what we believe in this regard? Some things can't all be true at the same time, right? We believe in a God. Well, what's that God like? What's this higher power that's out there like? Well, it depends on who you ask, right? If one were to ask Islam what it believes about a higher power, it has a belief in a higher power. Right? The Quran says they are unbelievers who say God is the Messiah, Mary's son. The Messiah, son of Mary, was only a messenger. All right, timeline, you have Christianity that comes along, and it presents Jesus Christ as this unique person who ever lived, Son of God, born of the Virgin Mary, claiming to be the Messiah who could save the world from its catastrophe. 600 years later, you get Muhammad come along, and the Quran gets written, and it looks back on this historic figure named Jesus Christ, and it says he is not the Messiah, and he is not Mary's son. Right? It also says this, Christ Jesus, the Son of Mary, was no more than a messenger of Allah. Say not Trinity, desist. It will be better for you. For Allah is one God, Glory to him. Far exalted is he above having a son. So later on, 600 years later, Islam says God never had a son. Christianity stood previously and said, oh no, God did have a son. All right, just laws of logic, they both can't be right. All right, we have to think about some of these things. One of them could be right and the other wrong, or they could both be wrong, but they both can't be right when they make those sorts of claims. And that's not unique just to Christianity and Islam, right? The Mormons have some interesting beliefs. They write and say, in the beginning, the head of the gods called a council of the gods, and they came together and concocted a plan to create the world and people. All right, when we just read Islam that says God is one, and then we read Mormonism that teaches that there is a council of gods, so there are several gods. Again, you can pick one of these, but you can't pick both of them because they can't both be true at the same time. It goes on and says, remember that God, our Heavenly Father, was perhaps once a child and mortal like we ourselves, and he rose step by step in the scale of progress until he has arrived at the point where he now is. Well, now this would be very different than what Christianity teaches. Christianity teaches that the perfect God existed throughout never having a beginning, throughout eternity, and he chose to become a human being in the person of Jesus Christ. But Mormonism teaches the opposite of that. Mormonism teaches that the God who exists over us was once a person like you and I were, and Buddhism falls into the series of religious structures of this world. It's a religion. Buddhism doesn't believe in a personal God at all. Buddhism believes in an ability for us to transcend our current existence through changing our thinking and through higher thought and meditation, but it doesn't believe in a personal God, and it doesn't believe in a God who took the form of a man and came to earth and lives and loves like people love. So all these beliefs cannot be true at the same time. And at some point, any religion calls on us to do this, but Christianity calls on us to believe it, to put our faith into what it's saying. And to do that and really sincerely believe something, you might have to say, well, I'm going to choose this one because I don't believe this one's right or that one's right. And I know that's kind of like weird taboo today. Like you can't tell other things they're wrong. Okay, listen, the laws of logic command that something has to be wrong when it conflicts something that is right. And, that might be new in public television today, but it's not new to how human beings have had to think their way through things forever in life, right? No matter what you feel and how sincere you are, 2 plus 2 is what? Okay, what if you're in a bad mood? What if you hate my guts right now? I mean, none of those things matter, right? 2 plus 2 doesn't become 5, it's 4. So if I say 2 plus 2 is 5, I am wrong. If I say it's 3, I'm wrong. Right? So we have to have a concept where certain things can be right and certain things can be wrong, or we really can't examine anything about what we believe. And Jesus makes a huge, huge claim, right? He says, I am the way and I am the truth. And when he makes that statement, he makes a statement that truth is discoverable. We can know what's true. And he makes a claim that he is that truth. And that's a claim worth investigating over the next few weeks. All right, Jesus makes one more statement, and then I'm going to be done for the night. He says, I am the way, and I am the truth, and I am the life. All right, now this is an interesting claim that Jesus makes here, right? Your last point there, Jesus claims to provide, the last thing is life in a dark world. And there's 3 little bullet points underneath that. And this is a quick summary. If you want to know what's the Bible about, well, you're going to learn what the Bible's about. And I think it's very helpful. If nothing else, you might just learn, how do I even pick this thing up and read it? Because I know that can be very confusing. It was a little confusing to me the first time I tried to read a Bible. But sometimes we've got these ideas like the Bible's just this strange collection of wise, sagey proverbs, right? Somebody said something really smart and it's like, ooh, wait, say that again. Let's write that down. That's really awesome. And then, the same guy who had the Bible in his pocket, somebody else said something really cool. Wait. What's your name again? Abraham? Say that again. And the guy just went around collecting all kinds of bizarre phrases, and we just read them like, ooh, listen to this one. God helps those who help themselves. Wow. Now, that's not in the Bible, by the way. But I know we think it is. And, so we get this idea, well, what is the Bible? Well, I'm trying to find my way through life. And when we treat it like a magic 8-ball, we kind of shake it up and let some Bible verse float to the top, and we read it, and it's like, go and kill the long-haired one. It's like, what does that mean? The Bible's not this mysterious, weird book. It is telling a story about God and humanity and a problem that came into our world and his means of solving it, right? So that's why you get these 3 little points here. We were created in God's image, so there's creation. Then there's this thing called a fall, fallen into sin, and then forgiven in Christ. That's the Bible's storyline, right? So when we read about Jesus making these claims, he's coming into this story as the remedy to a problem that existed. And when he comes and he says, I came that you would have life. All right, let's just go there with Jesus. We're walking around in sandals. Jesus walks up with his toga on, and he says, I have come that you might have life. And you and I are sitting there, chewing on some bread, hanging out, sitting on our lawn chairs, listening to Jesus and looking around. Okay, life. Thanks, Jesus, but I'm good. I've got life. Right here, my heart's beating. I can check my pulse. I'm good. But I'm sure there's some dead people in the cemetery over there who need whatever it is that you're offering. All right, Jesus spoke that to living people who had a pulse, because it wasn't this pulse life that they were missing. It was that life on the inside that was missing. Jesus said, I came so that you could have the life that you're missing on the inside. But where did we lose this thing? What happened? Well, the storyline in the Bible is that God created man. It says he created him out of the dust of the earth, formed him into a body, and then it says God breathed into him life. And man became a living soul. So man has a physical frame and a life that gets breathed into him. And God tells him this. Now, Adam, I've put you in this garden. It's a beautiful place. Everything you need is here. It's all full of blessing. Only there's this one tree in the garden that I don't want you to eat from it. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The day that you eat of that tree, you will surely die. Now, this is the very beginning of the story of our ancestry. So into the garden they go, Adam and Eve, and we all know the story. Even if you've never read the Bible, you know this story, right? They get in the garden and they do the one thing, right? There's, I don't know how many trees, a gazillion trees? Really? You had to pick that one and screw it all up for all of us? So they go eat from this one tree. And what's interesting is the Bible continues to tell the story of this man and this woman after that. But God said the day you eat of that, you are going to die. But if you've read the Bible, you've heard the story, they ate of this tree and neither one of them dropped to the ground dead, did they? They kept on living. They could have done this number and said, still got a pulse. Because it wasn't this life that died in that moment. It was the spiritual life that God had breathed into them that died in that moment. And man has been searching to fill up that missing space ever since. So when Jesus shows up in this world, right, God's plan was to send his son to fix what was broken on the inside of us, to return that life to us that had been lost. That's why Jesus can show up amongst a crowd and he said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. I am that life which you feel a hunger for on the inside of you. And that's the whole storyline of the Bible. That's why Jesus is this central key figure, because he's the only one who came to really fix us and to give to us what we were in need of. And that need continues to be showing up in spaces like this. Mr. LaBeouf, I don't handle fame well. Most actors on most days don't think they're worthy. I have no idea where this insecurity comes from, but it's a God-sized hole. If I knew it, I'd fill it, I'd be on my way, right? What is, insecurity? It's an interesting little thing inside of us, right? It's us trying to get fixed on the inside, and we never can seem to get people or circumstances or things in life to fix us. Because there's a God-sized hole on the inside, right? Well, long before Mr. LaBeouf said this, Blaise Pascal, 17th century, brilliant man, mathematician, physicist, and philosopher, said this: there is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every person, and it can never be filled by any created thing. It can only be filled by God, made known through Jesus Christ. That's what makes Jesus Christ unique. And as we look through this course and we study week to week and we look at different thoughts and religions, there's a unique claim that Jesus Christ makes. He claims to be the one who came to fix what was broken in the beginning. His message is not a message of, hey, you know what? Everybody's not perfect, so just try a little harder. That's not the message of Christianity. If you think it is, you're going to be really shocked by the course. Because the message of Jesus is that there's something broken on the inside of you, and I have come to give back to you what was lost long ago, if you will believe in me. That's the message of Christianity. Now, let me say this. This is the introductory night to the course, and right, you could be very suspicious unless you're sitting here with somebody who safely made it through the course. But you know, why do we do this, right? I mean, free food. There's a lot of meals got eaten tonight, right? This is all free. This isn't going to cost you anything. We're not going to ask you to sign something in the end. You know, there's no pledge thing going on here. Your Visa card is safe. Why? Why would we do this, right? I'm the senior pastor in this church, and we spend thousands of dollars every year to do this course. This is personally, for me, why I do it, because I can remember living life with questions that were unanswered inside of me. I can remember searching and seeking for something. I can remember believing in a God and in a Christianity that was boring, that seemed not worth believing, and it seemed irrelevant to my life. And then I had this encounter of coming to know Jesus Christ and picking up a Bible for the first time and having my life revolutionized. And I would gladly spend and be spent to give other people the chance to know God that way. And you're in a room with people who many have had that sort of an experience of knowing the God who fixed what was broken on the inside. And, you know, hey, you know, I don't actually show up with a van with a big G on it and stand in the church parking lot, but I kind of feel that way about God. It's like there's an excitement about knowing this personal God who created each of us for himself personally, that brings something into our hearts that nothing else can. No wife, no children, no money, no success, no fame, nothing else can. Now, what we want to do is just tell you the story about what is Christianity, what does it claim. It's up to you as to whether that serves something in your own heart, or whether you're just going to explore something. You got to go through this course for a number of weeks and be able to say, hey, you know, this is helpful for me to discover what I believe, and go through the course, get to the end, and you're more sure than you ever were about what you believe when you came in. That's fine. But what we want to encourage you to do, and tonight, if you do want to come back for the rest of the course, please just fill out the little form that's there so we know, so we make sure we got, you know, room for everybody, and we'll work it out. One more thing I'd encourage you to do. Sometimes people come to the first night and they say, I'd love to bring my wife or my son or my relative, my next door neighbor, whatever. You're welcome to do that. If you're pretty sure you think you might be doing that, maybe make a note of that on your registration card. I'd like to bring somebody back. I'm pretty sure they'll be coming next week. Just so we'll make sure we've got enough food for everybody. And if you got kids here up through age 11, we've got childcare downstairs, and we've got a children's program that your kids are welcome to participate in as well. All right. I think that's all I need to share with you guys tonight. Please just take a quick moment, fill out that form, give it to your table host, and we look